Picture this. A rumor resurfaces, not with documents or dates, but with whispers, half-remembered anecdotes, second-hand recollections, and the internet's favorite accelerant, implication. No proof, no timeline, just a name that guarantees clicks and a past era that invites imagination. Suddenly, a familiar public figure is trending again, not because of something new she did, but because of something someone claims to remember. Why does that work? And why does it work so well? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. That's the question at the heart of today's story. One that says less about any single allegation and more about how modern media turns claims into spectacles and spectacles into lasting doubt. Stick with me, because what happens next isn't about scandal. It's about how stories survive without evidence, why audiences can't look away, and what this says about all of us. The anatomy of a claim. Why alleged is the most powerful word online. Let's start with the most misunderstood word in media, alleged. On paper, it's a legal safeguard. In practice, it's a narrative rocket booster. When a claim is introduced, especially by a notorious figure, it arrives already charged. Not proven, not disproven. Suspended. Floating. That suspension creates a curiosity gap, and curiosity gaps are catnip to algorithms. They invite questions without demanding answers. Why does this matter? Because the internet doesn't reward certainty. It rewards engagement. And engagement spikes when audiences are asked to fill in blanks themselves. Here's the twist. The less specific the claim, the more flexible it becomes. Specifics can be checked. Vagueness can be endlessly debated. Ask yourself, have you noticed how the most viral controversies rarely hinge on hard evidence, but on tone, timing, and who is speaking? That's not accidental, and it sets the stage for everything that follows. Coming up next, why certain eras of a person's life, especially ones framed with loaded shorthand, become magnets for speculation. Why era labels stick, and why they're so dangerous. Notice how quickly the phrase yacht era catches on. It's evocative, visual, suggestive, and crucially undefined. Era labels compress time into a vibe. They reduce complexity into a single image you can picture in your head. That makes them powerful and perilous. Because once an era gets a nickname, it stops being a period of life and starts being a story container. Anything can be placed inside it. Context falls away. Nuance evaporates. Here's the uncomfortable truth. We love these labels because they spare us the work of understanding. They let us assume instead of ask. And when a claim is attached to an era label, it inherits all the assumptions baked into that label, fair or not. Which raises the next question. Who benefits from turning a life chapter into a caricature? Up next, how controversial messengers can supercharge even the flimsiest claims. The messenger effect. Why who speaks matters more than what's said. In media psychology, there's a phenomenon known as the messenger effect. The credibility, or notoriety, of the speaker often outweighs the substance of the message. When a figure with a notorious reputation makes claims, the reaction is paradoxical. People say they don't trust the source. Yet they share the story anyway. Why? Because controversy travels faster when it's attached to a controversial voice. It's outrage-adjacent entertainment. The audience response splits. Supporters say, consider the source. Critics say, where there's smoke. Both sides amplify the story. And amplification is the only metric that matters online. So even skepticism becomes fuel. Even condemnation keeps the topic alive. The claim doesn't need to be true. It needs to be discussed. Which leads us to the next layer. How platforms quietly reward this cycle. Next, the algorithmic incentives that turn claims into careers. Algorithms don't care about truth. They care about time spent. Here's a surprising fact. Most platforms can't distinguish between interest and outrage. They measure attention the same way. A long comment arguing against a claim is as valuable as one supporting it. A reaction video debunking a rumor can send just as much traffic as one promoting it. That's why claims metastasize. The system isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Creators learn this quickly. Titles become more provocative. Thumbnails lean into implication. Language softens just enough to avoid legal lines while still promising revelation. And audiences, exhausted but curious, keep clicking. The result? A feedback loop where claims are endlessly referenced without ever being resolved. Which brings us to a crucial turning point, media fatigue. Coming up, when audiences get tired, and why that doesn't stop the story. Media fatigue, when viewers are exhausted but can't look away. At some point, every controversy hits a wall. Viewers roll their eyes. Comment sections fill with this again. And yet, engagement continues. Why? Because fatigue doesn't kill curiosity. It changes it. People stop asking, "Is this true?" and start asking, "Why does this keep coming back?" The focus shifts from the claim to the system that keeps recycling it. That's when the story evolves. It's no longer about the person at the center. It's about selective coverage, double standards, and who gets protected versus scrutinized. Ironically, that meta-conversation can give the original claim a second life, this time as a symbol of media hypocrisy. And symbols are far harder to dispel than statements. Next, how silence, by the subject or the media, can make everything worse. The silence trap, why saying nothing feels like saying everything. Public figures often choose silence for good reasons. Engaging can legitimize rumors. Ignoring them can starve attention. But silence is a gamble. Because in a climate primed for skepticism, silence gets interpreted as strategy. And strategy invites suspicion. Audiences start projecting motives. They're above it. They're hiding. Their lawyers told them not to talk. None of these need evidence. They thrive on inference. This is the paradox of modern reputation management. The more carefully a narrative is managed, the more management becomes visible. And visibility breeds doubt. Which leads to the next chapter, the rise of alternative commentators. When trust shifts, attention moves. As mainstream coverage hedges, audiences migrate. Not necessarily to harsher voices, just to different ones. Long-form podcasts, independent newsletters, YouTube breakdowns that admit uncertainty. These spaces don't promise truth. They promise exploration. And exploration feels honest in a world tired of certainty. That migration doesn't destroy mainstream media, but it dilutes its authority. Narratives become contested. Framing becomes debatable. And once debate replaces deference, no story is ever fully settled again. Up next, what this means for public figures navigating the next storm. The new rules of reputation, why image control has diminishing returns. Here's the aha moment. Reputation today isn't built by erasing the past. It's built by surviving scrutiny. Audiences know images are curated. They know narratives are constructed. What they want now is consistency. How someone responds under pressure, not perfection in hindsight. That's why claims from questionable sources can still sting. They exploit a broader distrust, not a specific fact. So what actually works? Transparency about uncertainty. Avoiding over-polished defenses. Letting time and quieter stories do the work. It's less about rebuttal and more about resilience. Next, practical tips for readers navigating rumor-heavy news cycles. Actionable media literacy. How to watch without getting played. Feeling overwhelmed? Here are a few practical ways to stay grounded. Separate claims from evidence. Ask, what's actually being shown? Watch the verbs. Claims, suggests, and alleges signal uncertainty. Track incentives. Who benefits if you click, share, or react? Notice repetition. Recycling often means there's nothing new. Diversify sources. Triangulate before forming conclusions. These habits don't make you cynical. They make you informed. And informed audiences are harder to manipulate. Finally, what this entire saga teaches us about attention, power, and the stories we choose to amplify. The story beneath the story, and what you do next. This wasn't an article about proving or disproving a claim. It was about understanding why claims like this endure. Long after facts run out. In today's media ecosystem, implication can outlive evidence. Silence can feel louder than denial. And controversy can survive purely on momentum. The real question isn't what's true. It's why certain stories keep finding oxygen. And here's your call to action. Share your thoughts below. What makes a claim feel credible to you? Which signals do you trust? And which do you ignore? And how do you decide when to disengage? If this piece helped you see the media cycle more clearly, share it with someone who's tired of headlines, but hungry for context. Because the most powerful click isn't the one that feeds the algorithm. It's the one that feeds understanding.